Good morning, students. In today's class, I will continue with the essay of myself that was started in the previous class. As the title suggests, Cooley is talking about his own self in this essay. And just to make you remember, he has talked about his childhood, his school life, and his temperament. Then he also mentions an ode written by him at the young age of 12 in which he laid out his vision of life, his expectations, and aspirations from life. Let us begin with the remaining part of the essay. You may see by it, I was even then acquainted with the poets, for the conclusion is taken out of Horace, and perhaps it was the immature and immoderate love of them which stamped first, or rather engraved, these characters in me. Cooley says that it is obvious from this ode that he was familiar with Roman poet Horace, as he concluded by quoting him. The conclusion is taken out of Horace, and perhaps it was the immature and immoderate love of them which stamped first, or rather engraved, these characters in me. And as a young boy, he loved to read the works of Horace and others, and his affection for these poets was so deep rooted, and he was influenced by these poets. They were like letters cut into the bark of a young tree, which with the tree still grow proportionably. They were like letters, by which he means poets were the letters cut in the bark of a young tree. He is symbolically referring his body to a young tree. And he says, which with the tree still grow proportionably, but how this love came to be produced in me so early is a hard question. Just like the letters are carved in the bark of a tree, and these carvings grow in proportion over time with the tree. In the same way, the influence, the impressions of these poets upon the young author's mind continued to grow with his age. But how this love came to be produced in me so early is a hard question. I believe I can tell the particular little chance that filled my head first with such chimes of verse as have never since left ringing there. But it's hard to recall what was that certain incident that made him fall in love with poetry. Thus, I believe I can tell the particular little chance that filled my head first with such chimes of verse as have never since left ringing there. The sweet sound of verses that begin to ring in his mind at an early age has not stopped yet. He is speaking here metaphorically about his love for poetry and his love for books. For I remember when I began to read and to take some pleasure in it, there was wont to lie in my mother's parlour. Cooley started to read books and taking pleasure in it in his mother's parlour. Parlour is a sitting room or a drawing room. I know not by what accident, for she herself never in her life read any book but of devotion, but there was wont to lie Spenser's works. And her mother was fond of reading devotional books, and she never read anything besides that. And there in her mother's parlour, he got to read Edmund Spenser's works, particularly Fairy Queen. He's talking about Spenser's book, Fairy Queen. This I happened to fall upon and was infinitely delighted with the stories of the knights and giants and monsters and brave houses, which I found everywhere there, though my understanding had little to do with all this. And there in her mother's parlour, he got this book, and he was greatly impressed by the stories of knights, monsters, and giants, though he could not thoroughly understand this piece of work when he says, my understanding had little to do with all this. But he still loved it. And by degrees, with the tinkling of the rhyme and the dance of the numbers, so that I think I had read him all over before I was 12 years old. But he loved Spencer and his work so much and so that by the time he was 12, he had read all of his books, all of Spencer's books before he was 12 years of age. With these affections of mind and my heart wholly set upon letters, I went to the university, but was soon torn from thence by that violent public storm, which would suffer nothing to stand where it did, but rooted up every plant, even from the princely cedars to me, the hyssop. With these affections of mind. So Cooley says, with these affection means with this inclination and passion towards learning and reading, and my heart wholly set upon letters, I went to the university. He went to the Cambridge University, but was soon torn from thence by that violent public storm. Violent public storm here refers to the Civil War. He is referring to the Civil War that broke out at that time. Soon after he took admission into the university, Civil War broke out, and which would suffer nothing to stand where it did, but rooted up every plant, even from the princely cedars to me, the hyssop. And it somewhat changed his course of life. The storm of war affected every section of society. When he says princely cedars, cedar is a tree. If you know the tree of Devdar, he says it affected all the section of society, and he refers himself to the hyssop. Hyssop is a small tree or a bush. So he's trying to point out that every section of society, including the author, had to suffer the consequences of this war. Yet I had as good fortune as could have befallen me in such a tempest. For I was cast by it into the family of one of the best persons and into the court of one of the best princesses of the world. As I have told you earlier, Cooley was a supporter of royal family during the Civil War. So in return, he got support from the royal family in his difficult time. I was cast by it into the family of one of the best persons, he was cast into the family of royal people and into the court of one of the best princesses of the world. He joined royal court in France, and he served the queen there for many years. Now though I was here engaged in many ways most contrary to the original design of my life, that is, into much company and no small business, and into a daily sight of greatness, both militant and triumphant. For that was the state then of the English and French courts. Here, Cooley says the life he was leading there in France under the patronage of royals was totally opposite to the original design of his life. And if you remember in the first part of this essay, Cooley has mentioned in his ode his wishes from life. He wished for a simple and quiet life. But what happened? He was into much company and no small business, and into a daily sight of greatness, both militant and triumphant, for that was the state then of the French and English courts. Now, but destiny had its own plans, and now here at royal court, he was surrounded with so many people concerned with great affairs of English and French courts, and his life was totally changed. Yet all this was so far from altering my opinion that it only added the confirmation of reason to that which was before but natural inclination. But even at that time, he could not change his natural inclination. On the contrary, he became firm in his ideology. I saw plainly all the paint of that kind of life the nearer I came to it, and that beauty which I did not fall in love with when, for aught I knew, it was real, was not like to bewitch or entice me when I saw that it was adulterate. He could clearly see the reality of this high profile life, and he was not tempted by it, as he knew it was not it was as he knew is what it was real, but it was adulterate. Adulterate means mixed, not genuine. It was polluted. So he was not charmed by it. He was tempted towards it. I met with several great persons whom I liked very well, but could not perceive that any part of their greatness was to be liked or desired, no more than I would be glad or content to be in a storm, though I saw many ships which rid safely and bravely in it. While serving at the royal court, he met several great persons, but he could not tell was there anything to be liked or desired in their greatness. Neither he could tell was he satisfied with his life. And he says, I would be I liked very well, but could not perceive that any part of their greatness was to be liked or desired, no more than I would be glad or content to be in a storm, though I saw many ships which rid safely and bravely in it. He couldn't tell was he satisfied with his life, and he could see people around him who were having a great time during this storm. By storm, he means the civil war. And a storm would not agree with my stomach if it did with my courage, though I was in a crowd of as good company as could be found anywhere, though I was in business of great and honorable trust, though I ate at the best table and enjoyed the best conveniences for present subsistence, and that ought to be desired by a man of my condition in banishment and public distresses, yet I could not abstain from renewing my old schoolboy's wish in a copy of verses to the same effect. He says he shared company of the reputed people, ate with them on the same table, and he was leading a life of all comforts in his exile. Banishment means his exile, and this was a life that can ever be lived by a person of his status. Yet I could not abstain from renewing my old schoolboyish wish in a copy of verses to the same effect. But Cooley was not pleased. Still, he could not restrain himself, resuming his schoolboyish wish by writing these lines, which produces the same old effect of his ode, and in which he states, well then, I now do plainly see this busy world, and I shall never agree, etc. He says, and he writes, I can clearly see that this busy world of royal court, and me will never come to terms with each other. This world was not suitable for him. And I never then proposed to myself any other advantage from His Majesty's happy restoration but the getting into some moderately convenient retreat in the country, which I thought in that case I might easily have compassed, as well as some others who, with no greater probabilities or pretenses, have arrived to extraordinary fortunes. When Charles II was restored to the throne, His Majesty Charles II is talking about Charles II. So, when Charles II was restored to the throne, I never then proposed to myself any other advantage. Cooley never asked for any other benefit other than a suitable return to the country life once again, which I thought in that case I might easily have compassed, as well as some others with no greater probabilities or pretenses have arrived to extraordinary fortunes. He thought if he could acquire extraordinary things in life, things that he never expected from his life, so then there shouldn't be any problem in getting simpler things. But I had before written a shrewd prophecy against myself, and I think Apollo inspired me in the truth, though not in the elegance of it. He is mentioning here a prophecy. Prophecy means prediction. He's declaring a prediction about himself, and Apollo is the Greek god of music and poetry, and he is thought to have inspired him in writing this, where he states, though neither great at court, nor in the war, nor at the exchange shalt be, nor at the wrangling bar, content thyself with the small barren praise which thy neglected verse does raise, etc. So in these 4 lines, he's talking about himself and says, though neither great at court nor in the war, you are not good for a court or at a battlefield, nor at the exchange shalt be, nor at the wrangling bar. You are not good for a business or for a wrangling bar means and for an argument. Content thyself with the small barren praise which thy neglected verse does raise, etc. Content thyself. The only thing in which you can find contentment is the small barren praise that is not valuable, hollow. So that you can only find contentment in the praise that you earn from your neglected poetry that is not well known. So Cooley calls himself a misfit in this world, and the only thing he can find solace in is his own poetry. However, by the failing of the forces which I had expected, I did not quit the design which I had resolved on. But in spite of his declining forces, Cooley had not lost hope for his original design of his life, which I had resolved on. I cast myself into it a corpse perdu without making capitulations or making counsel of fortune. He will desperately try. Corpse perdu means desperately. It's a Latin phrase. He will desperately try not to surrender or rely on his fate. Making counsel of fortune means he will not rely on his fate for his further life. But God laughs at man who says to his soul, take thy ease. God mocks the person who rests in comfort, and he doesn't want to lead such a life. I met presently not only with many little encumbrances and impediments, but with so much sickness, new misfortune to me, as would have spoiled the happiness of an emperor as well as mine. And Cooley says, in facing so many problems of sickness, of illness, and it is a new trouble for him and these problems and impediments can ruin the happiness of an emperor as well as him. Yet I do neither repent nor alter my course. Non ego perfidium dixi sacramentum. Nothing shall separate me from a mistress which I have loved so long. But Cooley will not change his way of life. He is resolved to go on. He do not wish to repent or alter his life. Non ego perfidium dixi sacramentum. This is again a Latin phrase. Nothing shall separate me from a mistress which I have loved so long. Mistress here refers to his retired life in the country that he is wishing for. Cooley says from now on he would continue to live the way he has always loved and wished for. Nothing shall separate me from mistress, though she neither has brought me a rich portion, nor lived yet so quietly with me as I hoped from her. And at the end, though he couldn't settle with his mistress, with this life quietly as he hoped, but he is still wishing for a better life in the future. And he's quoting these 5 lines, and he says, "Nor by me ever shall you, you of all names, the sweetest and the best, you muses, books and liberty and rest, you gardens, fields and woods forsaken be, as long as life itself forsakes not me." He, from one of his poems, he is quoting some lines, and he is here swearing to live with some of his most favorite things in life. He says, "Nor by me ever shall you. I will not leave." What will he not leave? He will not leave books, liberty, poetry, gardens, fields, woods, as long as life itself forsakes not me. As long as he is alive, he will not leave these things. And these things will forever be his companion in the rest of his life. I have not falsely sworn. And he ends by saying that he is not falsely swearing. He is not lying about these things. So, students, we have finished this essay, and I hope it's clear to you. I'll start with another essay prescribed in your syllabus in the next class. Thank you.